The third. Like the first and second men, the third was robed in white, with white hair and beard. He was as tall as the second, but thinner. He was proud, but of lesser grace. His life had been focused, concentrated always in the application of his mind. With a sharp gaze, he arrived before the traveller and looked into the traveller's eyes before bowing his head and speaking. I was given a glade to turn into a wood, and that is what I did. I expanded a kernel of understanding into a wealth of matter. Born with resources, from my young life I increased my ability to understand. I applied that ability to a fount of purity that surpassed any that had come before. I learned to study and write. I reached my searching hands into every noble sphere. My documentations of the many worlds of the observed were unprecedented, and I claimed such intellectual ground as would increase my influence among the many. Although I compromised on purest form, I always kept the abstract heart of the glade behind the influence I held. However, the glade, to the extent of its heart, without more, would have died. I was the second eruption. I needed to inject enough into man's thought as could never be forgotten. My task was to protect that heart, that it could be carried forward intact. The heart of the glade was not to be seen, if it was to be protected. So I maintained that it was within all. Only then could man comfortably view that which was before him, as well as that which was said to be above him. Man needs comfort and ease. Before me it was learned that wisdom would ever be destroyed, that wisdom must be made digestible to man if he is to accept it. For that reason I learned to frame wisdom in clothes, the clothes of knowledge, a respectable man, those of ease. I shifted man's learning towards systems, knowledge that could be taken without avoiding affront to emotional belief. I clothed wisdom to such an extent that my name would be carried forth despite all competitors as true. And that way my wisdom would not be discarded, even if retained just for the sake of record. I was thus the anchor of compromise, the point at which the decision was made to spread man's focus so as to keep forever his true heart intact. Always hidden in the folds of my cloak, wisdom remained to seep through to spark the seeds of true reason in those susceptible few. By this method, we made inroads into the vaults of the most guarded compounds, but even those inroads amounted to little, for man has remained too destined to follow the other forces that call him. We sought to influence through the quiet, through discourse, but the tools of our competitors were always wealth and the sword. To the masses that lack reason, and to the hungry who lack food, to the oppressed who lack defense, quiet discourse amounts to little comfort. Wisdom turned into the knowledge of an historical principle, an empty comprehension of intellectual endeavor, always at the mercy of the sword and the power that carried it. I was the master of cloaking truth within matter. Now we learn that you shall cloak truth with wealth and the sword. This is your fight now. The glade has grown into a great wood that surrounds and protects its heart. We have done this much for you, and our work stands behind you as a skeleton to be refleshed. The traveller spoke. By compromising, you protected that which would have been destroyed far sooner. Your protection gave the possibility for life. We shall surge forth to destroy that against which you defended. You took great risk in the compromise you made. That which you protected might have been lost in your focus on matter. Without the sky, beings are left eternally to navigate matter in a constant sideways shifting of spirit. Without knowledge of the source of the light that gives meaning to change, no meaningful evolution can take place. Change occurs in all matter, and speaks between words of its cause. You saw this when you focused your eyes on measurable ground. But if you had not an awareness of light, you could not have navigated, nor charted your course as you did. Overlooking your guide, focusing on close matter, was the heart of your unknowing deceit. We shall now risk what you risked and more, for we shall use not just deceit, but wealth and the sword. Our cloak shall be our enemy's. It is our turn to use his methods against him. The only difference shall be in our objective. Where the enemy by destruction hinders life, we shall by destruction aid life. The man, his head bowed low, spoke. We realize that those who live by wealth and the sword become corrupted, for all such men are jealous. We each expected that over time we would win, that by way of our quiet influence truth would shine forth to conquer. But where truth is faced with the sword and hunger, it is more easily set aside than the immediate need for food and shelter. We only rarely took to the sword, as when the sword was employed it always proved in the end an unwise decision. Torin watched as the man turned and walked away. She considered matters that concerned her, the employment of darkness against darkness, the question of compromise, and whether after compromise sacrifice would be inevitable. She wondered if it would be possible for the metal of a sword to ever again be clean after having been touched by blood. She looked at her husband, but he stood without expression, almost without recognizable life. He seemed then to hold none of the emotion she held, foreign, almost disconcerting to the warmth in her heart. The next man stepped forward and approached.